Can an obscure 1960s science fiction novel give us a clue as to what the elites plan to do to the rest of us? And then we take a look at the story of a man simply trying to throw some junk away. It's something we do every day. We use something, time to chuck it in the trash. But what happens when the trash decides to take you out of this reality? That is, today on Dead Rabbit Radio. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. Hope you guys are having a great day too. I hope you guys are having tons of fun doing whatever you're doing. We got a ton of stuff to cover today. So first off, running into Dead Rabbit Radio Command is one of our 7th anniversary live stream donators. Everyone get on your feet and give it up for Mewtwo. Woohoo! Yeah, yeah, this little cat's coming in. Come here, cat. Pick you up. I'm not going to do anything with you. I'm just holding you up. I'm juggling you. YouTube made a generous donation during our live stream special. That is why he is going to be our captain, our pilot this episode. If you guys can't support the show financially through the live streams or the Patreon or the merch store, it's totally fine. It really, really is. Just help spread the word about Dead Rabbit Radio. That helps out so much. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know. Dead Rabbit Radio is your favorite paranormal show. That is how you can help the show grow. But let's go ahead and get this party started. YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and toss you an astronaut uniform. It's perfectly made for a cat. And everyone put on their own astronaut uniforms as we board the Rabbit rocket ship. YouTube, fire this bad boy up and take us out of Dead Rabbit Radio Command all the way out to deep space. We're flying into deep space in Mewtwo. Keep weapons at a ready. All of you guys, I need you guys to have your wits about you. Look out the portholes of this rocket. Keep your eyes peeled for anything. We are now in COSAR territory. Long ago, well, this story takes place in the future. You're like, wait, cavemen built rocket ships? In the future, we're in the future, okay? It's a science fiction novel. I probably could have figured out a better way to introduce this, but we're in the future, but in the past, not as far back as now, but farther back from where we're at in the story, humanity had spread throughout the stars. Huge empires had arisen. Man has finally taken its place as true rulers of the cosmos. And there was a federation of planets, and everyone seemed to get along. However, there was the COSAR Empire. The COSAR was controversial even among the other human civilizations that had colonized the planets, because the COSAR still held humans in bondage. They believed that slavery was not only a tool for economic wealth, for economic growth, but their birthright. You had an entire caste system that was basically master and slave. And the COSAR, because they celebrated slavery, they were not allowed to join the rest of the human federation. Despite the fact that they had wealth, despite the fact that they had power, the rest of humanity looked at them as barbaric. And not only did they have slaves, which would be bad enough, they also would very regularly kidnap other humans off spacefaring vessels and take them into the Empire and turn them into slaves as well. So the rest of humanity really didn't like the COSAR. But the COSAR eventually wanted to rejoin the rest of humanity. They were tired of being an outlier. Would they be willing to give up slavery to join with the rest of the humans? Maybe. It was a big question in the mind of a man named John Craig. John was on a diplomatic mission to the COSAR. They had said, we want to rejoin this federation of humanity. And John, as an ambassador, was sent to go speak to them. One of the problems that the COSAR, as well as the rest of humanity, was that there was an alien race, this ant-like species called the Plith. And there were rumors that soon an invasion would take place. The Plith were actually going to begin to strike back against humanity. and destroy us. It's a very pulpy setup for a story. It sounds interesting. Sounds like something we've seen done a dozen, if not hundreds, or even thousands of times at this point. Back in 1975, this was the plot of a novel called Space Relations, a slightly gothic interplanetary tale. And when it hit the shelves, it only cost $1.25. And that was the price for a while. It didn't really make a splash. And eventually it just went out of print. You could find one at a used bookstore for quite a while, for probably about 20 or 30 years. You could find the novel for like $5 at a used bookstore. It was just one of many sci-fi novels dotting the landscape. But nowadays, if you go to abebooks.com or any used book reseller, you'd be looking at spending $600 for this novel. Oh, wow, that's quite the increase. 2007, 2008, you could have picked it up for $5. Then it increases in price 100-fold. If you want a copy now, you're going to have to shell out some serious bucks. Why? What changed? Did the author become notorious? Maybe. Did the plot itself become well-known among those who love conspiracy theories? Love might be the wrong word, actually. Is it possible that conspiracy theorists who take this stuff extremely seriously found out about this novel and begin buying copies and keeping it to themselves, putting it in their library, another clue in the war of the elite versus the rest of humanity? And that was really the setup for the book back in 1975, right? The COSAR was a very decadent planet. They were draped in wealth. They were both respected and feared by the rest of the Federation of Planets. And it wasn't that they just had slaves, which again is bad enough. It wasn't that they just kidnapped slaves from other spacefaring vessels. People traveling from one part of the Federation to another, they get boarded by space pirates who take these average citizens and sell them to the COSAR. That would be bad enough. It was that they seemed to specialize in a very specific type of slave, the sex slave. The COSAR were known not just for taking humans and putting them to work. They were known for taking humans and turning them into playthings for their decadent desires. John Craig is aboard a passenger ship in this novel, and it is boarded by space pirates, and they kidnap everyone on the ship and then put their newest toys that they're going to sell to COSAR into deep sleep to make the journey to the marketplace. But mid-journey, John is awakened by the space pirates, as well as some other prisoners are woken up as well. The space pirates go, "Hey guys, sorry about the whole deep sleep thing. Sorry about the whole selling you into slavery thing." They're like, "You gonna let us go?" "No. But we figured we'd give you something to dream about while this vessel is en route." And that is when the space pirates show that they've also woken up out of deep sleep a 15-year-old girl who is then gang raped by the pirates. And our hero, John Craig, is either forced to watch this horrific act, or, because I just could only get the plot from a Wikipedia article. There's not a lot written about like a blow for blow by this book. Not like I need all the details, but it's a little sketchy on this. John Craig either watches what happens or he participates as well in the gang rape of this 15-year-old girl. And you go, well, that would make a big difference. Like if he's this hero and you're forced to watch something horrific, then obviously you still have no moral culpability in it. But did he engage in it? I'm not for sure. But even if he didn't, he's not a protagonist in the normal sense of the word. Because what happens is John Craig is, after this event, sold into sex slavery himself. He's purchased by the beautiful yet sadistic Lady Morgan Sidney, one of the ruling class of the COSAR. And she turns him into her own personal sex slave. For 2 years, he is held captive. The description reads, quote, "Together, they lived in her castle, ruling over and engaging in sexual relations with those under their dominion, including an enslaved teenager at a clinic used to breed enslaved people, unquote. So there it definitely sounds like he is part of the rape society. Yes, he is being assaulted himself. Yes, he is a sex slave himself. But it does sound at this point that they are doing this together. And they go to this facility to breed other sex slaves. And there he has sex with a teenage girl. And he does all this stuff. He's a member of her sex court for about 2 years until he breaks free. Why does he break free? Does he break free because he's doing all of this horrible stuff? No, he actually seems to be totally fine with that. He breaks free because he finds more information about the Plith attack on humanity, so he has to escape to warn the rest of the Federation. Again, really weird drive for the hero to be like, yeah, this whole, sex slave thing that I've been a part of and I've been now forcing on other people, this is what it is, but the aliens are about to attack, now I have to escape. A normal hero would be like, no, I got to escape day one, I don't want to be a part of any of this. You go, Jason, it's just some pulpy sci-fi novel. I mean, did the value of it go up because of things like 50 Shades of Grey, the whole sex slave market? It's just some weird book, right? However, while I can't get a moment-by-moment plot for the book, there's been a lot of articles written about this book. It is more than just a pulpy novel. Well, it is that. There's been a lot of articles written about this, and while I haven't read the book myself, they do say that John Craig, the hero of the book, does admit that he enjoys having sex with teenage girls. Or raping them, right? It's not consensual. He does enjoy raping teenage girls. In 1975 was a different time, right? You could write this in a book that was going to be mass published, but it didn't ring any alarm bells in the general public, and it just eventually disappeared into the vast sea of sci-fi novels. But the person who wrote it is what makes this story far more complicated rather than just some sicko getting his book published. The man who wrote it, his name is Donald Barr. Before he wrote the book, Donald Barr was the headmaster of a school in New York called the Dalton School. It was a private prep school, and annual tuition for the school was $64,000 in 1960s money, which I can only imagine is insane, but it was that elite that you would be willing to pay this much to send your kid there. And Donald Barr, this was before he wrote the book, but he worked there as the headmaster. He ran the school. He was the headmaster there from 1964 to 1974. So he's probably writing the book while he was working there. The book got published in 1975. And in 1974, because of a disagreement between him and the school board or whatever ruling council was there, he ended up leaving. It had nothing to do with his book. He actually wasn't accused of any impropriety at that school. Donald Barr, the author of Space Relations, used to be the headmaster of this school. Now, before he left, and there are different sources. Some sources say he had nothing to do with this. Some sources say he had everything to do with this. Some sources say he had everything to do with this. He was the guy who introduced him. He was the guy who hired him. He was the guy who, at every step of the way, was part of the hiring process. So a lot of different sources on this. Legitimate news articles have been written about this. This isn't conspiracy theory stuff. But no one can get the timeline right. Or maybe one is and the others are false. Okay? But in one way or another, even the articles that say they didn't work there at the same time still connect Donald Barr to helping a young man get a job at the Dalton School. A young man who had no college degree was hired as a math teacher at Dalton School. And they say Donald Barr, even if he wasn't working there at the time, put in a good word for him. You can connect this web however you want, but there is a connection between Donald Barr, headmaster of Dalton School, and a young man who was hired as a math teacher who had no college degree, hired at one of the most elite, if not the most elite school in New York, a young man named Jeffrey Epstein. Either he hired him directly because they knew each other, or he simply put in a good word after he had left. Whatever the case, Donald Barr is directly connected to Jeffrey Epstein getting a job at this prep school. Super fascinating, and we're not done yet, but super fascinating because out of all the Jeffrey Epstein stuff we talk about, most of it's always related to him being already a wealth manager. He's already older. He's connected to all these people. I can't say for sure, but I think I didn't know he was a high school teacher at a prep school. Because here's the thing, that kind of changes the game. We know he's a sicko. We know he had a thing for teenage girls. We know all of that stuff. But I didn't know he was actually ever a teacher. And the thing is like people looking back, they go, how did he get a job if he didn't have a college degree at this prep school? Donald must have put in a good word. And again, other articles say he's the one who actually hired him. But whatever the case, we have that connection between Donald Barr and Jeffrey Epstein. There is a connection there. And the fact that Donald Barr wrote a book in 1975 about teenage girls getting raped by the most powerful elite parts of society that are their own, they're so powerful they don't have to be part of the rest of the human federation. They do want to join now, but what are their true goals? We don't know. There is actually a sequel written to this that there's no plot summary for. And then Donald Barr stopped writing sci-fi novels. Was the elite realizing that they need to rejoin humanity because an alien invasion, an outside threat, will destroy all of them? Only with their combined powers could they fight off this alien threat. Did the Kosar want to rejoin the Human Federation so they could slowly take it over behind the scenes and have an endless sea of sex slaves? I mean, both of those really would point to a lot of Illuminati theory. Either the Illuminati eventually wants to control all of us, and those they can't control, they'll destroy. Or there's an unknown threat approaching Earth. And while the Illuminati may have made deals with aliens or may have made deals with the devil himself, there may be a other threat coming that they cannot face alone, and they have to try to take over the planet. There are all sorts of conspiratorial stuff here. A lot of it in the realm of sci-fi, the realm of conjecture. But back to the facts, Donald Barr knew Jeffrey Epstein. And he wrote a book about teenage rape by the elite and how pleasurable it was. Like John Craig in the book, I don't know if he raped the first girl, but he doesn't have a problem with the second one. And he actually, the character, does enjoy it. The hero of your book is raping teenage girls, and then you're also an acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein. But that's not all. Donald Barr, Jeffrey Epstein didn't have a college degree. He comes to work at this prep school. Donald Barr had quite the resume himself before landing at this prep school. In fact, during World War II, Donald Barr worked at the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which was the precursor to the CIA. So he worked for the OGs of the CIA, and now he's at a prep school. And he's writing a book about elites raping teenagers without impunity. Odd. I mean, I get it. Members of the CIA, members of the FBI, Homeland Security, and all this stuff, they're people too. They have bizarro fetishes just like everybody else. But we have a CIA, and again, one of the original guys, one of the guys who was there before it was the CIA, is friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Writes this book, Space Relations. Donald Barr is also the father of William Barr. William Barr, who I think everyone's familiar with, at least if you follow U.S. politics. I shouldn't say everybody, but I'm a big political wonk. William Barr was the Attorney General underneath George Bush Sr. You can't really get much higher than that other than being the president. He's the Attorney General. He is the law of the land. William Barr was also the Attorney General for 1 year under President Donald Trump. During that year that he was Attorney General, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested for the second time, and William Barr recused himself from the federal prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. He said, I don't want to have any part of this. People can recuse themselves for all sorts of reasons. It can be because they know the subject that's being prosecuted. It could be that they're too close to the case. One of their loved ones was a victim of this guy. There's many reasons why you can recuse yourself, but the lead lawman in the United States, when Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and facing trial to be sentenced again, William Barr says, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And in that same 1 year time span, when William Barr was the Attorney General for Donald Trump, that was when Jeffrey Epstein died in his cell. Was it a suicide? Was it a murder? Was it a forced suicide? Which has always kind of been my theory. He killed himself, but he was not given any option to. You got to kill yourself or XYZ will happen, which is the same as murder. Whatever the case, William Barr's dad, Donald Barr, either directly hired Jeffrey Epstein to get a job at his high school or put in a good word for him. Jeffrey Epstein, probably the most famous child molester this side of Jimmy Savile, dies while William Barr, the son of Donald Barr, I mean, it's crazy, right? It's absolutely crazy, this connection. And then, I knew about William Barr. I didn't know how close his relationships were with Jeffrey Epstein, but his dad knew him. And then finding out that William Barr's dad wrote this book about raping teenage girls, which here's the interesting thing, right? From an art point of view, I'm not going to say anyone who does business with Stephen King is a sicko because in it, there's a gangbang among kids. I get it. Art does exist on a different level. That's fair. I totally understand that. However, I will say this. I don't hold Stephen King accountable for horrible things that happen in his books. But if he also was connected to a famous pedophile, if it turns out that Stephen King's best friend was Jared from Subway, I'd be a little less forgiving, a little less lenient on, he's just an art creating art. I don't think Tom Cruise is actually a hitman killing people in LA. And I don't think the director is a hitman killing people in LA. But they can make the movie Collateral. I understand that. But if Tom Cruise also hung out with hitmen in LA, I'd be a little more suspect about it all. And that's what we have here. We have a former member of the OSS writes a novel about the elite raping teenage girls engaging in sex slavery, gets Jeffrey Epstein hired at a high school. Okay, I mean, like right there. Do I have to go any further? And then Donald Barr's son is Attorney General when Jeffrey Epstein dies in custody. The connection is just so on the nose. And does that novel give us a clue as to what is going on behind the scenes? Because we know all these different elements, right? I mean, obviously, human trafficking is a problem, a huge problem. How closely is the elite tied into that? Are they the main buyers? Are they the main sellers? Are they the ones who keep turning a blind eye so this can continue across the globe? Is the book Space Relations not a science fiction novel, but what some people call predictive programming? Showing us what the plan is, putting it out in plain view, so they can laugh when you read it and you don't understand. They're letting you know exactly what they're doing. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of predictive programming. I think it requires a lot of leaps of logic. But as far as the conspiracy, I understand why people believe it. And you have to wonder, if predictive programming is true, how many other obscure novels are there out there, or television shows or movies that people haven't seen that do lay these plans out? And we don't know it because we haven't read these books because they're so obscure. As one little last, I don't even know how to classify this. It's just kind of a bizarre connection. Donald Barr, William Barr, Jeffrey Epstein. There is a type of herpes called Epstein-Barr. Okay, listen, I'm sure it was named after the scientists who got it. Johnny Epstein and Melissa Barr ended up having sex one night, and they created a new type of herpes. That could be possible, right? But it could also be that, again, they're laughing at us. There's this disease, there's a type of herpes called Epstein-Barr, and it's not because of the scientists who discovered it, it's because of these two guys, Donald Barr and Jeffrey Epstein. It's one of those stories that, honestly, I think is fascinating on one or two levels. One, the novel itself is kind of an interesting, pulpy sci-fi, but a very dark hero. Right? You have a hero who enjoys raping teenagers. That's a villain. That's not a hero by any stretch of the imagination. That in and of itself is kind of a bizarre piece of sci-fi. But then you have all of these other connections that turns it from a piece of sci-fi to possible predictive programming. And you see all of these connections between the elite. That's also connected to this book about the elite trying to subjugate humanity into sexual slavery. And it's only the threat of an alien invasion that could possibly stop that. Or does it stop it? Does the COSAR eventually end up taking over the rest of the Federation? The clues to that are in a sequel that's even more rare to find than the original. As far as I can tell, there's not a single summary. No one even knows what the sequel is about, except for those few who have read it. Those few elite that laughed as they read the plan they have for the rest of us, printed in a dime store novel. So we don't have enough time to do the garbage story. It's not a garbage story. The story is about garbage. We don't have enough time for that. So we're going to go ahead and switch it out. YouTube, let's go ahead and toss you the keys to the world-famous Carpenter Copter. Everyone climb on board as YouTube flies us out of COSAR territory. I mean, what a crazy story. Really, absolutely bizarre. But fly us out of COSAR territory. We're headed back to the safety of Earth. And continue flying until you take us out to the United Kingdom. Nice leisurely flight out to the United Kingdom. We're headed back in time to the year 1882. And that's when the Society of Psychical Research was founded. And I'm not mispronouncing that word, right? For the first time, I'm pretty sure that I'm pronouncing it right. It's an old-timey organization. They used old-timey words. What this group was basically a paranormal investigation group. It's pretty dope, right? That they had those a long time ago. I mean, I guess before that, it was just called religion, right? Your paranormal researchers were the ministers going, look out, there's demons coming. And then eventually, scientists took it over and started making up words like psychical. Well, anyways, the Society for Psychical Research started in the United Kingdom back in 1882. And something that they started doing pretty early on is they began to, much like we do here today, which is totally awesome, right? Carrying on the tradition. They began to seek out stories of the paranormal. Because the research is nothing if you don't have the stories at all, right? You have to have the information. So they actually started doing this census where they would ask people to send in their accounts and then they would catalog them and try to make sense of everything that's going on. And that's what we're still doing here today. That's what Art Bell and George Norrie are doing. That's what other podcasts are doing, and authors and websites and all of that stuff. We're trying to gather as many accounts as possible and seeing if there's connections. And we've made some of those connections on this show. That's one of the things I'm very proud of about this show. And a lot of you guys have been helping out with that, sending in these stories, making these connections. So we're going back. I mean, we're basically the new version of the Society of Psychical Research, but they're still around as well. So we're not completely taking them over. I'm not stealing their trademark or anything. They're continuing to do these censuses as far as I can tell. I might have mispronounced that word, but as far as I can tell, in fact, we're going to take a look at one that was published in 1990. It was volume 57, part 215 in 1990. We saw a researcher named DJ West create this publication called, you're like, Jason, they're not paranormal researchers. If this is what he's doing, hold on. DJ West published a work called A Pilot Census of Hallucinations. Well, that's a big difference. Paranormal, you're like, guys, crazy news. I was just down at the mental asylum. You won't believe the paranormal events going on. It turns out President Trump is there, and he's spying on Napoleon using a toilet paper tube. You're like, Jason, if he's hallucinating. He's hallucinating. That's not real. Well, okay, well, hold on. Okay, let me be very, very frank with you. It's 2 a.m. when I'm recording this. It got too hot for me to do it during the day. I took a long nap. I'm super tired. I woke up from like, Jason, you're just like the shoulders we stand on, a fine tradition of paranormal research. We're carrying the torch today, and now you're like, whatever, I'm too sleepy. Too sleepy to pay attention to my notes. Paranormal researchers, he did call it hallucinations, but maybe they were paranormal hallucinations. Let's go ahead and get on with the story here. I found this very, very interesting. I mean, truly, what is a hallucination, right? What is a hallucination? No one knows for sure. Let's take a look at this story. You're like, Jason, you sound really sleepy. Nah, I'm awake. Let's take a look at this story. Case 0878. We're about to meet a young woman. We don't have a real name. We're going to call her Debbie. We don't know where this story took place either. Definitely not in her mind. It definitely was not a hallucination. Must have been accidentally published in this one. Debbie's a nurse. She's 21 years old. And on this particular morning, it was like 8 a.m, she woke up earlier than she normally does. She's like, well, I'm awake already. Might as well start getting ready for work. So she takes a bath, rubbing herself down with a bar of soap. That's weird to take a bath before you go to work. I mean, you've definitely woken up an hour early. You're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spend 40 minutes bathing. Just hop in the shower. It takes like 2 minutes. She takes a bath. She gets dressed. She hums a lot. It keeps the hallucinations at bay. She's like, as long as I'm focusing on my buttons, I don't notice the gremlins hiding in the corner. She's up and about in her room, walking around. She's drinking tea, so we can assume the story takes place in England. She's walking around, she's drinking tea. Yummy, yummy, yummy. What is a bath but human tea? Right? That's pretty good. Write that down, British people. You can use that over there. If you think about it, what is a bath other than human tea? You're sitting in hot water for a long amount of time, and then get out. You like to, Jason, key part of tea is that you drink it out. Someone's drinking it. Sewer rats. It's tea for sewer rats. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Anyways, she's walking around. She's been up for an hour. That is a point, right? This is not a dream. Only an insane man would call this a hallucination. She's walking around her room when all of a sudden a huge hole appears on the floor. Whoa. The hole was so large, Debbie said it took up the majority of her floor. And she's standing there and she's looking down at this pit that is so deep she cannot see the bottom of it. But she said that the edges, or like the sides of this pit, seemed to be made of a rocky formation, like jagged rocks and normal rocks. It's not like a walled well with stones, but just kind of like these rocky outcroppings here and there, leading on down into infinity. Or if not infinity, so deep she can't see the bottom of it. That in and of itself would be absolutely terrifying. There's a couple different things you kind of got to deal with in this moment, right? One is you've completely lost your mind. You're hallucinating. And I'm going to stop there to say I had to go shut off my alarm clock. I actually myself woke up a couple hours earlier to work on this podcast. I was supposed to sleep until, well, it's boring. Nobody cares about my sleep schedule. But anyways, while I went to shut off my alarm, I go, you know what, now I'm going to check to just find out exactly what the census of hallucinations are. It is a paranormal journal. That's just what they called it. It's a terrible name. Maybe hallucinations meant something different in old-timey Britain, but it's a terrible name because obviously I was confused. I was like, oh man, I thought this was going to be a spooky story. It might just be a story of insanity, but then... So it actually is what they call it is a collection of what they believe to be true paranormal events. They didn't just collect a bunch of stuff from cuckoos and publish it. But going back to the whole, I mean, that would be scary enough. A hallucination is scary for you. I shouldn't use that word, because now you're like, hallucination, paranormal events, okay. Insanity is scary to you. If you are seeing things that aren't really there, right? If you're experiencing things that shouldn't exist, but they're just in your mind, that's very terrifying to you and sad for everybody else. But I'm not scared if you're having a scene. I'm trying not to use the word hallucination. I'm not scared if you tell me, man, I came to school the other day and I went into my biology class and my teacher was a frog. And he said, dissect me. I'm the ultimate lesson. And he gave us each a scalpel. Okay, that would terrify me. You're all covered in blood. You're like, oh yes, the professor wanted us to dissect him. Professor Frog. Like, what? That would scare me because I would think that you might do that to me. You're like, oh, homework, I see. I get to dissect a cow's brain. I'm like, move out of the way. But generally speaking, if someone's having I'll just use the word, if someone's having a hallucination that's sad, you go, oh man, it's too bad. That guy went crazy. But it's not scary. I've said before about my uncle who, it's a long story, but basically he was snorting meth. He used to use meth, and someone gave him a hot shot where they scraped some battery acid off of a car battery and mixed it in with his meth. So when he snorted it, it completely pulverized parts of his brain, as you could imagine. Totally messed him up. And he was totally fine. I knew him for years and everything was totally fine. I guess he had threatened to murder a bunch of people, but I wasn't a part of that, right? It wasn't scary. I didn't even know I was a kid. I just remember there was one summer my parents wanted to let me go live with my great-grandma because I spent every summer with her, and apparently because he was talking about murdering everybody. I didn't know. But then, the next summer my parents had no problem sending me up there. I was quite the demon child, so they're probably like, oh, okay, there's a chance he might get murdered in a mass killing, but the other option is that he stays with us for 3 months. Hey, Jason, you're headed back to Sacramento. But then at the end of his life, maybe the last 10, 15 years, the mental illness came back. Obviously he was on some serious medication, and I knew him for 20 years growing up. No big deal, right? He's a totally chill guy. Well, then in the last 10, 15 years of his life, he hallucinated. He had a delusion that he was Dale Earnhardt. He was really into NASCAR, so it didn't come completely out of nowhere. But, Dale Earnhardt had been dead for quite a while at this point. He believed he was Dale Earnhardt, and he had to be put into a mental hospital. And it was just heartbreaking because he was 100% convinced he was Dale Earnhardt, the legendary NASCAR driver. So when his parents would visit him, he'd be like, hey, you guys got to get me out of here. You guys got to get me out of here. Do you know who I am? I'm Dale Earnhardt. If you can just get me out the door, trust me, I'll be able to drive away. Well, it'll be quite the chase. That was sad for us, but it wasn't scary. It might have been scary for his parents. And, the murder threats probably were, but I wasn't there. Hallucinations are scary for you, because you don't know what is reality, but it's sad for everyone else. However, if Debbie did not have a hallucination, if what she was experiencing was an actual paranormal event, now we're talking about fear for all of us. Because if this young woman getting ready for work could one day walk out and see an endless pit in her living room, then that could conceivably happen to any of us at any given time. Imagine you're driving your car, and all of a sudden a portal appeared in front of your car, and you plummeted down a pitch-black shaft leading nowhere. Or what would be worse, leading nowhere or leading somewhere, a dimension that is not of ours? Maybe you're out for a jog one day, and you feel the sun beating on your skin, music's pumping in your ears, and all of a sudden you feel yourself falling. The last thing you see of our world is when you look up as you tumble down, you see this planet's sun for the last time disappear into the distance as you fall endlessly. That type of paranormal death trap would make you afraid. If you believed that these things actually were possible, you would wonder, could this ever happen to me? But here's the thing, I actually left a part out of Debbie's story, the part that makes it truly terrifying. The part that turns this story from a paranormal anomaly to a paranormal predator. Debbie was standing there and she saw this giant hole in her floor leading off to oblivion. Within moments, it closed, and she was once again looking down at her floor. But before that, before the pit vanished, it said something to Debbie. Debbie was looking down into the endless void, and she clearly heard a voice, not in her head. She clearly heard a voice say 2 words to her. Jump in. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com. That's terrifying. That's terrifying to me. And you wonder how many people actually did. And we just never knew what happened to them. They just vanished off the face of the earth. Absolutely terrifying. deadrabbitradio@gmail.com is going to be our email address. You can also hit us up at facebook.com/deadrabbitradio. TikTok is @deadrabbitradio. Dead Rabbit Radio is the daily paranormal conspiracy and true crime podcast. You don't have to listen to it every day, but I'm so glad you listened to it today. Have a great one, guys.